I was 16 years old. I can't recall the specific month, but I know it happened during the summer. My parents were away for the weekend, leaving me home alone with free rein for 2 days. Most of my time was spent cycling between watching YouTube, gaming, and grabbing snacks from the kitchen. I was mostly upstairs in my room wearing headphones. As a teenager, it felt nice to just be in my room, doing whatever I wanted without anyone bothering me. However, while I was gaming, I began to hear voices. Initially, I thought a video had started playing in the background, but when I checked YouTube, everything was paused. So I took my headphones off and realized the voices were coming from outside. My bedroom window was slightly open, allowing me to hear a muffled sound of someone speaking. It was raining, which made it harder to hear. Whoever it was had to be close, near the outside walls of the house. I couldn't make out what they were saying, or if they were talking to someone else. It sounded like just one voice. By the time I got up from my chair and walked over to the window to listen more closely, they had stopped talking. I decided to go downstairs and check the other windows to see if they were still around, as it was pretty weird for someone to be that close to the house at 8 p.m. However, when I reached the bottom of the stairs, I couldn't see any sign of them. I took the opportunity to grab a bag of chips from the kitchen, then returned to my room. I must have spent about an hour gaming up there, time passing quickly. In the middle of a round, I suddenly heard a voice outside my headset. Even with the headphones on, the voice was much clearer than before. It wasn't necessarily louder, but far less muffled, and I was certain I recognized what was said. I quickly removed my headset and listened intently. The house was quiet, with only creaks, as I waited. About 15 seconds passed before I heard the voice again. Luke. The man called out my nickname. My full name is Lucas, but I went by Luke with my friends, and that's what he used. I didn't recognize his voice though. More importantly, I was almost certain his voice was coming from below me, inside the house beneath me. I quietly placed my headset on the desk, got up, and approached the bedroom door. I tried opening it as quietly as possible, careful not to let it creak or make any noise. Just as I opened it, he called my name again. Though yelled isn't quite the right word. He called it out, but almost softly, like calling someone's name just to ask them something. It was very calm and friendly. In the context of someone potentially breaking into my home, this only made the situation more disturbing. His voice had a grating quality, sounding like he was likely in his mid-50s and a heavy smoker. As he said my name again, I confirmed he was definitely inside the house, probably near the bottom of the staircase. I backed up, leaving the door open, scared to close it and make noise with him so close. Then I went to the back window, opened it further, carefully stepped out onto the roof, and closed it as much as possible without latching it shut. It wasn't a full roof, just an overhang to the front porch, creating a sloped ledge about 3 or 4 feet wide right outside my window where I could stand or sit. It was definitely not the safest place, especially wet and slippery from the rain. But I didn't have many choices unless I wanted to hide in the bedroom and likely be found before the police arrived. That's when I realized I was in trouble. I had left my phone on my desk. I was too focused on getting out to even think about it. I moved back toward the window, ready to go back inside and get it. But just as I peeked into the room, I saw a shadow moving down the hall outside my room through the doorway. I quickly moved back out of sight. My heart was racing. A few seconds later, I heard shuffling in my room, followed by the man calling my name again. Luke. That creepy, soft tone. I peeked just a little so I could partially see the room. All I saw was his shadow moving on the wall, looking at my desk, likely figuring out I was nearby. He hadn't noticed I'd left yet. I really wanted to look more to see who he was, but I couldn't risk getting caught. I started getting that gut feeling, that sixth sense, that I was about to be discovered. So I acted fast, moving to the farthest point of the ledge. Below me was just a small bush and some grass. The drop was maybe 8 to 10 feet. I dangled for a moment, then let go, hitting my legs on the ground and falling back. It hurt, but I didn't break anything. I got up and ran to the nearest neighbor. Honestly, I don't know how people in the stories I listen to manage it, because in my case, no one answered the door to help. It was the middle of the night, and they probably thought I was some lunatic banging on their door. It still worked out though, because one of the houses called the police on me for banging, and I was able to explain the situation to the officer who arrived. I had no idea how long I was out there. My guess is about 20 minutes before the officer arrived. The man in my home was gone, but the officer also found my room window fully open. The intruder had left the ledge sometime after I did. It made my heart sink knowing how close he had been. In the following days, my legs swelled from the jump, but ultimately, I suffered no lasting injuries. It's crazy to think that decision might have actually saved my life, or stopped whatever sick plans that intruder had. I think it will always linger in the back of my mind, knowing I was so close to seeing who the man was, yet I didn't. Part of me wishes I had risked looking, but it's easy to say now that I'm not actively in a life-threatening situation. As far as me and my family know, the guy never returned and didn't follow up on anything. I'm much older now, so I don't think anything will ever come of it. And hopefully it stays that way. Story 2. By BGI, work as security for a small office space in town. Even after this incident, I decided to keep the job because I couldn't find anything else with better pay. Trust me, I'll leave as soon as I can find something else. Though, one reason I took the job and didn't mind it initially was that the office space was part of a large business district, or office park, located in a fairly wealthy part of town. I figured there was no way people would actually try breaking into these places, knowing that in a wealthier area like this, there would likely be security, if not on-site personnel, then at least cameras and monitoring systems. Anyway, I clocked in at 10 p.m. and did my first quick rounds to activate all the detection systems, then headed into the security office. It was more like a closet, really. No windows or anything, making it an unpleasant place to be. If I could help it, I liked to walk around quite often. I was only required to get up and walk around every hour, including a perimeter walk of the building. But I did it more frequently because just watching the cameras and systems was really boring. However, this night it was raining so hard that walking around outside wasn't feasible, so I was stuck inside walking the hallways. One thing to note is that the cameras always fogged up whenever it rained, rendering the outdoor cameras nearly useless. About 30 minutes into my shift, an alert appeared on the monitor, indicating motion detected by one of the cameras on the front of the building. I checked it, but could barely make out anything, though it did seem like someone might have been standing outside the front door. I could just see a little bit of movement, so I left the office and went down to the first floor. My intention was simply to go outside and see what the person wanted, or if there was even anyone there, given how strange it was for someone to be that close to the house at 8 p.m. But when I opened the door and looked out, no one was there. Still just the rainy mess outside and nobody in sight. I closed the door and reset the alarm. It was very strange for anyone to be out there that night. Maybe they had the wrong building. In any case, it looked like they had left, so I tried not to dwell on it. I returned to the office. I had only been sitting down for another 5 minutes or so when I heard a phone ringing. It wasn't the security phone on my desk. It sounded like it was coming from a floor below, in one of the offices. Annoyed, I got up and walked down there, but by then the call had already gone through. I waited a few minutes, and just as I had predicted, they called again. I followed the sound into what looked like a typical office room. Desks lined up in rows, the main overhead lights off, but right in the middle a small glowing light emanated from a phone on one of the desks. I walked up to it. It displayed "Unknown Caller." I found it extremely odd that a random phone on one of the office desks was ringing. Why this specific one and not the reception desk phone, which was linked to the company? How did anyone even have that specific office phone number and extension? I was tempted to answer and ask who was calling. The mystery was hard to ignore, but it wasn't my job to answer random calls, and I could have gotten in trouble if someone found out. So I left it. I didn't know how to put the phone on silent, so for the next hour, I constantly heard it ringing downstairs as I sat upstairs in the security room. At 1 a.m., I got up and did a quick walkthrough of the office, just the usual rounds. It only took 10 minutes, and then I was back at the security desk. But I hadn't even sat down when I heard a thump resonate through the building. It echoed as if it came from the hollow stairwell or possibly a hallway, genuinely frightening me. I checked the system but saw nothing interesting, so I ran back down to the first floor to check the doors I had just verified. As I approached the front door, I felt a shock noticing a blinking green light on the alarm system. The specific door's alarm had been put on pause, essentially disarming it. I never did that. I only turned the system fully on or off, never on pause. Feeling tense, I pushed open the door and looked outside. Still pouring and still nobody out there. I closed and relocked the door. Something really strange was happening that night, and it was the first time since getting this job that I felt genuinely uneasy. I had no idea what was going on. I started hurrying back up the stairwell, hoping that if I looked over the system again, it might provide some answers. I reached the third story when I stopped right on the stairs. The door leading to the third floor office hallway was open, the same hallway where the phone had been ringing earlier. I carefully stepped closer, hearing nothing as I approached, and looked out into the hallway. Then everything went black. My sight, hearing, probably my whole consciousness just cut out for a split second. When I came to, I was dazed and stumbling backward. Even though it was brief, I instantly knew I'd been hit in the back of the head. My body fought to stay awake as I fell down a few steps in the stairwell. I saw the blurry outline of someone standing in the doorway. I immediately got to my feet and stumbled down the rest of the steps, my ears ringing and head throbbing. As I managed to get outside the building, I used the work phone on my belt to quickly dial 911. I hid behind my car in the rain as I waited for them to arrive. I was so disoriented I couldn't tell you how long I waited. They didn't find anyone inside the building. I was taken to the hospital and treated for a pretty bad concussion, but was otherwise okay. While it might seem like a regular break-in, a lot of things added up to make it feel more professional. They chose a rainy night when the camera lenses were fogged over. Assuming it was them calling, they knew a specific office worker's phone number that wasn't publicly available. And most convincing, they knew how that exact security system worked and how to disengage it to get in unnoticed. It seems too coincidental to be just some random person breaking in on a whim. The guy hit me so hard too, I couldn't even make out anything but a blurry image. So I had no description for the police. All this being said, I know I won't get any answers. Months after this happened, and I'm still working there, the company hasn't told me anything. Nothing about if anything was stolen, if they knew who it was, or even what he broke in for. Nothing at all. It's really odd, and I'm still looking for a new job. But until then, I'm going to be much more aware of any strange occurrences at this office. Story 3, by Anonymous. A few months ago, my buddy Thomas and I were hanging out at my place for the evening. Neither of us had work the next day, so we were just chilling and having some beers. Honestly, we didn't plan on staying out that long, but by 10 p.m. I offered Thomas the couch if he wanted it, which was pretty common. He still lived with his parents, so hanging at my place was his way of getting some space. Anyway, we made plans for the next morning, and it turned into planning a pretty cool day. But since Thomas hadn't brought any extra clothes or anything, and before he got too drunk, he quickly drove back to his place to grab some stuff. That way, he could drink more when he got back and have clothes for the next day. Obviously, he could have just stayed home since he was going back anyway, but like I said, he preferred hanging at my place. The drive was only 5 minutes, so I just stayed behind and waited. I was going to wait on the porch, but I hadn't noticed the massive storm outside until then, so I went back inside and waited on the couch. I was scrolling on my phone and sipping my beer, not really paying attention to the time. But after about 15 or 20 minutes, a knock finally came at the front door. I quickly got up and casually opened it for him, but was startled to find it wasn't Thomas. It was just some guy dressed almost entirely in black and dripping wet. The man looked incredibly creepy. There was no way, even being drunk, that I would have ever opened the door for him. Normally, I would have checked first if I hadn't been expecting Thomas. And with the crazy storm outside, what was this guy even doing here? Before I could say anything, the man put one foot in the doorway and looked inside. He looked like he'd been out in the rain for hours, though he had a tired expression on his face. I reached back for the door, apologized, saying I thought he was someone else, He kept his foot in the doorway though and just smiled. I started to close the door, but he still didn't get the hint, keeping his foot right there. It was incredibly weird and awkward because for several seconds we just stood there. He didn't say anything, and I was too drunk to think of anything to say. Then finally, he moved his foot and took a step back, still smiling as I closed the door. Immediately, I went back to the couch and texted Thomas about the creepy guy lurking outside. Honestly, it was more of a joke text. After getting the door closed, I found the whole thing so ridiculous that it was kind of funny. Maybe I'd had a few too many drinks. I waited a considerable amount of time, definitely longer than it should have taken him to get back. I figured the storm might have slowed him down, but when I went to the window to check on the storm, I saw Thomas's car was back, parked on the curb. Confused, I went to the front door and opened it, but Thomas wasn't there. I stood in the doorway looking out into the rain for a minute, but it was clear Thomas wasn't around. His car was parked and turned off, and I didn't see any movement inside, so he definitely wasn't still sitting in it. I pulled out my phone and called his cell. Right away, a light lit up in his car. It was definitely his phone, and the light was bright enough for me to see clearly that he wasn't inside. Now I was worried. I walked out into the rain to the bottom of the driveway and looked around. I called out his name, but it was too loud outside to be heard. Somehow, it wasn't until I was completely soaked that I remembered the creepy man who had been outside the house earlier. I started to think he might have had something to do with this. An overwhelming feeling about the situation took over, so I ran back inside, closing and locking the door behind me. As I took my shoes off, I felt something else was wrong. I looked up and the main hallway was dark, really dark, as if none of the lights were on back there. I was sure I'd left at least a couple of lights on. I slowly walked down the hallway. The storm outside the walls and the quiet inside the house made the tension almost unbearable. I reached the end and looked around. All the rooms were dark, but right along the wall, I saw the faintest outline of someone pressed up against it, trying to stay hidden. I must have stared for a moment too long, because after a couple of seconds the man moved confidently and stepped toward me. He had one arm raised, holding something in his hand. I didn't have time to see what it was before I ran. I used every muscle to run as fast as I could out the front door and as far away as possible. I hid on a random house's front porch and called the police. From there, I could see my house somewhat through the rain, so when the cops arrived a few minutes later, I watched as two officers calmly walked up to the door before suddenly raising their guns and sprinting inside. I guess they saw the guy still in the hallway and chased him out the back door, but they said he jumped the fence and they lost him in the storm. I ran over and told them everything. They immediately started searching for Thomas, and thankfully found him after only 5 minutes. He was locked inside a car parked down the road, tied up. It turned out the man creeping outside my house had held Thomas at gun as soon as he pulled up. Then, after forcing him into the car down the road, he came back to the house and broke in through the back while I was looking for Thomas, presumably intending to do the same to me, which meant when I saw him holding his arm up, he was pointing a gun directly at me. If it hadn't been too dark, and if I had seen the gun, I probably wouldn't have risked running away, leaving both me and Thomas at the mercy of this insane man. Anyway, the car the guy was using was stolen earlier that night, so it was a dead end, and the man was completely lost in the storm. There were no traces of him whatsoever. We have no idea what he intended or why he did any of it.